We've traveled through emotional switchbacks, and they're often brought on through poignant circumstances in life, such as job loss, career changes, divorce, breakups, illness, and loss of loved ones. Those sharp bends and moments force you to pump the brakes and navigate the switchback slowly, feeling all the emotions that come your way. Sometimes you slow down so much, you realize it requires a little more effort to rev the engine and get back into high gear. You essentially have to slam your foot down on the Kickstarter and manually add in the components that'll get you on your way once again. This can mean putting a plan in place, incorporating foundational habits and practices for your well-being, and honoring the state you're in and what you're hoping to move towards. Today's episode is called Kickstart Your Life, where we'll talk about the journey out of the switchback and how to propel yourself forward once again. This is the Motovation.
Hello, all. Well, if you listened to last week's, it was a more somber listen. Like we said, in what do we do in the aftermath? What does it look like? Not even in the aftermath, because it's not like it just stops one day, right? That hurt or that grief or that disappointment or that frustration, all the emotions that's to follow, whatever it is that's taken place in your life that's halted you to begin with or slowed you down, disrupted the life that you once knew. I spoke about the grief that I've been going through over the past couple of years and substantially over the last few weeks, almost a month now, since the passing of my aunt, who was very, very close to me. And in those few weeks afterwards, you're just in the tornado that is all these emotions, which we use the analogy of the switchbacks, emotional switchbacks. And you're exhausted. You're mentally, you're emotionally, you're physically, you're spiritually, everything. You are just exhausted after 1 week, let alone 2 weeks, let alone 3 weeks. And I was doing all the things to take care of myself. I was having downtime. I was doing things that brought me joy. I was spending a lot of time with friends and family. I went back to Saskatchewan. But like anything, when you pause, you slow down, you take that time, there's also that point in time when you know that your everyday life, you have to get back to it. You have to step back in. And not even necessarily the have to out of obligation, but also the have to because there was a reason likely you were doing it in the first place. It was probably bringing you joy. It was hopefully bringing you joy. You were doing things that you loved, your career, spending, whatever your hobbies were, that sort of thing. And so you want to get back to a little bit of normalcy, but you don't feel so normal. You're exhausted. Like I said, I was exhausted and you almost feel this emptiness as well along with it, hollowed out, if you will. And it's that feeling of like, how do I go back to that? How do I step back into that? And I kind of just had that moment where I just knew that it was going to be a choice, like a real choice and a commitment that it's not going to look or feel the same, but you just have to choose to step into a routine day, that day that it looked like before it kind of got so disrupted in the way that everything else got put on hold. And you think, well, how am I actually going to do it? And the only way that I was able to do it, and when I say able to do it, I'm talking this look like this morning. This was this morning for me, where we came back to Vancouver last night. And I felt like just stepping into the city that I live in was going to be a little bit of momentum, a little bit of working with my brain and body to say, okay, we're here where we live life. And I was like, I'm going to jump on that and I'm going to utilize that. And I'm going to say, okay, tomorrow morning, you're going to do your morning routine. And again, my morning routine from past episodes I've spoke to is that gratitude, journaling, and the gym. And I haven't been to the gym in like over a month because of being, at the hospital, being with my aunt, and then the passing, and then North Battleford, Saskatchewan, all that. So you can imagine how I feel depleted to begin with, let alone jumping back into an old gym routine at 5:30 a.m. But it was one of those like, you're just going to go, and whatever it looks like, but you're going to just do these things. You're going to make your body move in those directions, put on those clothes, write in that book. You're going to go down there. And so I did. I woke to the alarm. I wrote in the book, and that felt pretty good. I'm writing gratitude, and I'm really focusing on what I'm grateful for. And, I've got my gym clothes on, and now I'm headed down to the gym, and I thought, oh God, what's this going to look like? And in some ways it looked wonderful. In other ways, I was like, oh gosh, yeah, you've been out of here for a while. But I had so much adrenaline around a bit of the pride that I had that I was just doing it. And I rode that wave of adrenaline. And even though my muscles and my body were really, really weak, and I could only lift about a quarter of what I was lifting just a month and a half ago, I focused so much of my energy on what was working. I focused so much energy on the fact that I was just there, and that I had already tackled 3 things that morning that a couple of days ago felt like it was just, it felt unfathomable to just do that. And here I was doing that. And it was that part of you that for a moment, you felt as though that you were feeling that part of life on the other side of that grief, disappointment, frustration, overwhelm, and that a little piece of you was stepping back into myself, and actually a little bit better for it, because I even focused and used the adrenaline and the momentum around my auntie, and the sadness and anger that kind of creeped up while I was working out. I utilized that. I used that. I used that to, shadow box. I used that to skip longer. I utilized whatever was running through me in that moment, to continue to step into my day-to-day life, the things that I knew were working for me ultimately to live my best life, and in a small way, but ultimately. And that's what we want to really kind of talk about today, is when you're moving through these difficult things, but you're also ready to step back into life in a certain capacity. And that might even not look like these huge things, like I'm talking about grief or the loss of jobs, deaths, all those things. It might even just be like, hey, I've had a crazy summer. I put all of routine on pause because that is summer. And now how the hell do I get back into that now that, fall has hit? It might even be on that level. But the actual how do I do those things when I'm exhausted or I'm so far away from any routine that serves me? Or how do I do it when it feels like there's no point to it, maybe because the point that you did feel about life has shifted or changed. But the one thing I'd say right now for myself is I just had to start with what I knew was working for me before, that switchback came on. And I had to know that I was going to have to really give it a committed effort. And I had to make the choice that there was no ifs, ands, or buts. I was waking up at that 5 a.m. alarm. I was going to do those things. And whatever level of like success it looked at, like it was going to be a success because I did them hard stop, period. And so, yeah, let's dive in, Chrissy, about even your experiences in that regard as well.
Well, and one thing from what you're speaking to there, if anyone has ever kickstarted a motorcycle, it requires a strong effort down the right. And normally what happens, you don't necessarily get it going that first round. You have to be persistent. And I don't think anyone that ever tries to kickstart a motorbike after the first try is like, no, it didn't activate. That's fine. I'm just going to go back in now. No, you would give a kick at the bucket again a million times until you get that engine moving. So it's about having the determination to be like, we are going to go for this ride, and really capitalizing on when you have that fuel to move forward, because it's the overwhelm that I think is the common theme between all those life instances you spoke to. You're overwhelmed if you've been frolicking in the summer and you have to get back to routine. For myself, everyone knows I left a job that I knew very well, started a new venture, and there's been a lot of overwhelm. And with yourself, obviously, with taking on a sick loved one and then going through a great loss, there is a lot of overwhelm. And you may have different emotions that you attach navigating in that overwhelm. But you kind of also are, anyone in those instances is basically presented with a choice. Do I allow this to swallow me up? Or when I've moved through and processed the emotion, do I use this as the fuel that's going to propel me forward? And when I say that, I don't want to be leading you down the misconception that you're going to wait to get motivated to do the things, because we've covered many times. It does come after the action. And that's where I think creating those non-negotiables for yourself are so important. Those foundations of your daily habits, that commitment to yourself where you're like, this 5 a.m. wake up for me in this moment is my one non-negotiable of that morning. You achieved that. And what started to happen? Then you got your gratitude journal done. That felt good. It made you want to then have the workout, and your day has propelled forward in that way. And it's about honoring those moments where you can, because any big life shift as well, you're just like we talked about in the switchback episode, you may have a couple moments of regression back into those feelings. And it's very important to honor that and let those move through you, but it's equally important to not stay there. And that can feel like a monumental task. What I can tell you through my experience in this big life shift, even Lori and I were chatting before we sat down here, and a lot of my non-negotiables started to drop off. It's like when all of a sudden you're overwhelmed with a new task, new venture, new life, new way things are looking. It's very easy to let those things that are typically non-negotiables for you start to fall off the wayside. So one of the ones that I was dealing with was, because my role requires heavy use of social media, I started having my first thing in the morning and my last thing at night morphed into being my phone. When you are overwhelmed already and trying to function well through life, I can tell you for a fact that is about the worst thing that you can do for yourself mentally. It impacts your sleep. It impacts your well-being. I mean, there's a million scientific papers that are why so many health and wellness gurus will tell you that's an important thing to break up with. And so as I started to find myself in a little bit more of a scattered headspace, instead of the focus and drive of things that necessarily served me in my entire wheelhouse of a day, I was like, this is one simple non-negotiable I can make to myself. So particularly in the mornings, I have now made it a non-negotiable promise that phone does not get picked up. It is replaced with a book in my hand. And I don't go out just diving into chapters. I'm like, even a couple pages with my coffee is serving my brain better as a mental diet. So it's kind of like any, I don't necessarily want to use the word goal, but it's kind of the best way that I can say it. Like for yourself, Lori, obviously your light goal right now is to immerse yourself into life and what that looks like on the other side of this wildly emotional experience that you've had to navigate, while still having the repercussions of emotion from that experience. But your goal is to invite a little bit more normalcy, so to speak. And so inviting even one element into your day that you make a nonstop promise to yourself is going to start setting you on the path that more of those come to fruition for you. But it really is about taking that first step, because any goal, generally those first steps are the hardest. And I think that's why when we have an experience of overwhelm, it's very easy to kind of allow it to envelop you and not move out of it, because you're kind of like, I don't know, there's so much emotion coming at me. There's so much tasks coming at me. I'm not really sure what to do or where to start first. And the easiest thing to do when we feel that way is to just not start at all. Easy for in theory, but it actually destroys your mental game completely. Whereas those little small steps and foundations can go a long way in kickstarting yourself. And you know what's good for you. Like, Lori, how good did it feel to get back to those foundations today?
Oh, it felt incredible. And if here's the thing too, because I wasn't looking to just like switch up immediately and, step right out. And again, I don't have any expectations even now that I've just stepped into healing, and it's all part of it, all the healing. So if I crash again tomorrow and have a really, really devastating day of emotions and overwhelm of emotion, that's okay too. That's okay too. I'll still go down to the gym. I'll cry at the gym if I need to, but I'll still go down. But doing these things that allow me to step into a certain state of normalcy, like you said, like to do the things, because I try and live a very purposeful life. So I try and do things on the daily that actually serve me and have purpose to, who it is that I would like to be in this life, the things that I want to surround myself, all those things. So these things and these routines have real purpose. And I'm reminded too of my auntie's passing and, all the illness that's taken place over the past couple of years, of just that of like, I'm alive, and it is so crucial that I make the most of this life, because you are not guaranteed a tomorrow. And with these routines and with these things that serve us on a day to day, what it also offers more clarity around those moments where I may go into a valley of grief. Because what also happens is that when you are in that kind of state and it lasts for lengths of time, your body and brain are always in a state of mapping. It's taking in information, putting it together and mapping it to save energy and time. And so the more time that I spend solely in a state of grief and only grief, my brain and body are mapping that as something that I am choosing, even though I'm not choosing necessarily, but that, hey, this might be a state that I want to continue. And so when I'm also in those moments of lull, if you will, or those moments that I'm in the grief, just in a lulled moment, that I have to accelerate on the things that serve me, to remind my brain and body also that, like, yes, that's okay that I feel these things, but this isn't the state in which I'm wanting to become a habitual part of myself. And so it helps also so that I have clarity around those moments that are grief, that are just deep sadness, that do feel like this is a day to just really care for myself. And maybe that down at the gym just looks like stretching and not actually lifting weights or, running or skipping rope. It just might be stretching. It might be honoring my body. It might be just being in tune with my body. But it offers me clarity. It offers us clarity to moments that you do have to listen, and not so that we're not avoiding or distracting ourselves from really important emotions that we have to experience and move through. And not avoid, but also those moments in time where, okay, now I'm just starting a habit, or I'm just feeling sorry for myself, if you will. And it's not a grieving moment. You've slipped into a, well, why me? Or woe is me. And there's just no purpose, or that offers me nothing. That's nothing I need to move through. That's something I'm actually creating for myself. It's a suffering that I have created, not one in which should be honored, if you will.
Well, and at that point, then you're operating at such a low vibrational state. And I am definitely a believer in energy. I mean, everything around you is energy. You are energy. You emanate energy. You share energy. And when you're in those states, as we know, you tend then to attract things more in that low vibrational field, which is the last thing that you want more of. But it's often why you see people that don't necessarily do a lot of self-work, or don't have a lot of self-awareness around how they speak to themselves in their mind, or what they invite into their lives, tend to have more in their life of the suffering, because it really does double down. And that's why it is important to experience all the emotions, because no one is asking you to be a superhero. And really, quite honestly, if you're not taking any of those moments to slow down and honor those, you're being disingenuous to yourself, and masking it is not going to help you in the long run. It 1000% will make an escape out of you, whether that be through dis-ease or mentally just not being able to cope at all. So it is very important. But the whole point of this is really to find when you are going through, again, these big changes or a seasonal shift, to really start to look at what serves you. And most importantly, as you're such a great example of in yours, Lori, is capitalizing on when you do have that extra fuel working for you. Because in a moment like today, where you have entered more high vibrational states and into a little bit more state of flow, it starts to invite more of that in your life as well, which I think is such a tremendous partnership in a way when you are navigating a route of healing. And I'm not talking like, oh, I'm going to go on this flow and I'm going to just step into $1 million at my doorstep or anything like that. It could be a simple hearing from a friend you haven't in a long time, or a nice interaction in the street, just more of that pure kindness, goodness into your sphere. If you are in that low vibrational for long periods of time and not really looking for an exit strategy or having an awareness like that, that quite literally can become your state of being for months, years, a lifetime. And I think if you truly do an audit of people that you have in your life, you could probably think of one or two people that may be living in that way. And that is such a state of suffering that they've become married to, because as we've chatted on other podcasts, it becomes a source of comfort. And when you're freshly going through something, you're cognizant of how fucking uncomfortable going through grief is, or a job loss, or a relationship breakup, or quite honestly, even a huge shift in routine. So why would you want to not do the work to invite into your life a better state of being? That is why you got to kick down the Kickstarter. And again, a lot of it does lie into your foundational habits that you can start reintegrating, because things do get ultra messy, especially when life comes knocking in a way that you can't expect. You're not going to be able to help that. Even if you are the person that is a guru of doing all the work, you are not going to be able to hold it together enough. Everything's the fucking shit of all of it's going to go flying and you won't even know where it's going to land. But all of a sudden you can start to collect yourself and build the momentum toward inviting more zest for life at the end of the day. And not to say, it's like, as soon as that came out of my mouth, I was like, you know what? Even the downtimes are the zest, because you need the contrast. And we talked about that so much, but more so just not getting married to the suffering. Because again, that can become your entire state of being. It's coming off of you, it's returning to you. And that's just not a way to live. Very easy to fall into.
Oh, very easy to fall into, and understandably so. Because like you said, like, you're so exhausted. Like, today's the first day that I genuinely feel like, I just feel like a regular human. Like the exhaustion, just the confusion, and like, even I bump into walls and shit. I have bruises on my legs. I have no idea where I got them from, because it was just in such a exhaustive state that you're just kind of bumping around, and everyone's also doing regular life around you, and your whole life feels on pause in that moment. And you're trying to just figure out what pieces to put back together. And they look different even. And so I really mean it when I say that, and you do too, when we say, like, we're not just like, dust yourself off and like, it's just
walk into the sunset.
Yeah. Like, find the silver lining and just be your best self. It's that knowing that you've got to just start, and
you got to work for it.
It's not going to be easy. It's going to feel like you're dragging, weights on your back while starting in some way, but it's incredible how quickly you can kind of shed that weight. Like today, it felt like, oh my, how am I, and it was like, well, if you just, if you just walk into the gym, that might count. And it could have been worse. I've had days where I've, been through much less and dragged myself to the gym. And it was like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, and walked out. And that felt difficult for different reasons. And it could have been like that today. But again, where I say it wasn't about what it looked like. It wasn't even about the workout. It wasn't even about all those things those were all the bonuses that it reminded me, and it gave me clarity, and it helped, with momentum throughout the day, and it helped with my mental health. Like, those were all the bonuses. The only real goal of starting my day today was just the fact that I was willing to just put my toe back into life, because my life was on pause, because it was too overwhelming to unpause. It didn't even feel like it was an option. And again, surrounded myself with beautiful things, went on sunset and sunrise walks, went into the forest and things like that while I was back home in Saskatchewan. So I still exposed myself, but it's those parts that you have to go back to routine life. And that, for some reason, feels more daunting than anything, or did for me. And I had like one client last week, dip my toe in that felt good. I felt a little off kilter, but it felt, good. But it's just that it's like dipping your toe back in. And that was the only point, was to get the toe in. And it turned out I had a little splash. I had a little dance in the water, a little playtime. So that was the bonus. But now that that's given me even a little bit more clarity and a little bit more oomph, and I don't say if, I say when, because it is the reality that when I do go into another valley, in regards to this grief, whatever level at which that looks like, this will also really help me when that happens, because I'm not going to be like, oh no. I'll be like, hey, it's okay. Like, again, where you're just like, I'm going to come out of this. No feeling lasts forever. This feeling I've got today, this is wonderful, but this doesn't last forever either. But it's sure as hell a powerful reminder in those darker moments or those valleys that, like, you know what, I can get up tomorrow and I can see, what I'm working with. And I'm going to give it all again tomorrow. And I might have a great day, or I might have an okay day, or I might have a dark day or whatever. But I'm going to be working with myself as much as possible. And that's all I feel like we can really ask of ourselves, is like making the commitment to work with yourself in every moment, at every day, especially after those really, tough goes.
Well, and I think you speaking about having that client and back to work, another element that's important to mention. Obviously, that was a bonus and felt good for you. But as you dip your toes into the things, really acknowledging that it might unearth some additional emotions that you weren't expecting. Point in case, you could have gotten on that call and, you are amazing working with joy in the home, but you hear about the problems they're having their kids. And inside you might've had an inner narrative of like, you think you have problems, at least you're fucking alive. Like, as you're going back, you may unearth some things only because you've been through a big life shift. So you might have to tackle some resentment, some anger at times, sadness over things that you didn't expect, joys that you didn't expect to come out of nowhere. And it's just really important to know that that's all part of the process. This isn't really something when you are kickstarting back into life and back into high gear that is meant to be gotten perfect. There is no perfect. Life is messy, and the journey out of it's going to be messy too. And there's no getting it right or getting it wrong. Or as you say, Lori, if I wake up today and feel great, wonderful. If by the afternoon I don't, honor that shit and do what I need to do to get through that hump of the day. Same when you pick up the next day. And if it doesn't feel quite right or the same way, that is okay. Any times our human spirit is going through that state of overwhelm, it's a lot. And like you're navigating as well new experiences simultaneously. So everything in you through your core is kind of like, I really just kind of wish this was comfortable and safe. But luckily you're someone that has joined us on the podcast and know that much of the juice of life happens outside of that. And sometimes the juice of life isn't necessarily having to traverse through a joyous moment. It is going through those really harsh realities. But I cannot emphasize enough, there's no way that you're doing this incorrectly, so long as you're trying for yourself. When it feels ready, and maybe when you've reached that point where you know, yeah, this has been enough, and I have a choice to make here of what that ready looks like, and I have to be ready now. But definitely don't put the pressure on yourself that it needs to be this flawless journey, because again, that is when you can start to dance with the masking of the things, which is another way that's easy to do, especially in society as it is now. Because quite honestly, how many times do you encounter a stranger, or not even a stranger, a coworker or a friend, and it's like, how are you doing? Oh, yes, fine, thank you. How are you? And that's automatic. And we know if we were to say, actually, the day's been shit, and I don't really know what to do with that, people don't know how to react or take that. And so as humans, we kind of tamper down sometimes merely to make other people feel okay and comfortable, which is quite funny because we all ask the question. But just kind of knowing that it's okay to have those days that, yeah, you're feeling fine, you're feeling good. And some of them are going to be a total fuck up shitstorm on the other side, as maybe the bike doesn't kickstart and you're going to have to kick it 50 times that day. None of it is done incorrectly. You're just doing those little steps for yourself. And then ultimately, that's how you give back and do well for others. You have to look after yourself.
Well, that was just said so goddamn perfectly.
Do we get to sing? Motivation maintenance did not feel appropriate last episode.
No, it didn't, but this time it does. It feels okay to sing a weird song. Imagine how weird that would have been if we were like, motivation.
I remember even like transitioning softly. I'm like, I almost don't even want to say the words. On that note, though, for those that did listen, thank you so much for sharing your beautiful feedback, because I was so damn proud of you, Lori. And I know a lot of people were as well, because opening up in that state of rawness, there's not enough realness in the world. And I think that's why you struck a chord in a lot of people.
Thanks, my love. Thanks all. Thanks all. It was therapeutic. It really was in the long run. And it was one of those things where at the moment, like I said, you're hoping that if it can just kind of like help someone else know that they're not alone in it. And then you kind of realize very quickly, you know, actually this is for me too, to just say these things out loud. And so I was blown away when we got the, what do you call it? Like the numbers that listened in on the first go. And so thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Anywho. Okay. So my motivation maintenance would be, especially if you are kind of feeling lost in the tornado of it all, exhausted, where do you even, it's like, that's all well and nice, but where and how do I begin? I would sit down with a piece of paper and I would first write my why. Like, why is it important for you to do the thing that would help you? Why? Who do you want to be on the other side of that? It might be for your children. It might be for your family. It might be and should be for yourself. Because I want to remember, what I feel about life, or I want to be closer to that person that felt more aligned with me prior to all of this, or whatever it is, but get really clear on just like why, and start to kind of envision that version of yourself. And then I would write down as well, what is working? What do I have that is working for me right now? Do you have time? So, okay, go for a long walk if time is on your side. If you have, someone that can help you and motivate you, you've got a friend, a resource, like what do you have that is working or could help you achieve that little mini goal of stepping into yourself. And then I would work with some sort of momentum of a memory where you got through something difficult and got to the other side. Because I utilize a lot of times the momentum of remembering that I can do hard things. I utilize past memories that have stayed with me where I was in a very difficult position, whether that was a teenager or a young person, whatever, but that I overcame something that at the time seems, so surmountable and in overwhelm. And so that gives me a remembering that, yes, I, Lori, can do hard things. And so get clear on your why on paper, get clear on what is working or what resources are available to you. And then I would get clear on using a memory in which you did something hard as a momentum to remind yourself that, yes, I will do this. This is hard, and I will do this, and I will tackle this as well. And then choose one step, just one step that you are going to do tomorrow, not next week, but tomorrow. Today, if you feel good enough. But that would be my motivation maintenance. Get really clear and then make a commitment to make a choice and just do it. Just do it. Decide what it feels like afterwards. And if you want to do it again, but you commit to doing it that next day.
Hear that, Nike? We coined it first. Just do it. It was actually us.
Hear that? Is do it. Just do it.
Let's do it. Love that. I have one that it's funny when you kind of need the advice, it's available to you. And there have been 2 individuals that have mentioned doing this for themselves. And I actually integrated into my day parts in not even waiting for a moment of overwhelm, more so making it a habit to do so. And it's funny because what I'm about to share is not complicated, but I impatiently have trouble making it to 5. But when you get up in the morning, once in the middle of your day and once at the end of your day, just stop what you're doing, just be, and take 5 deep breaths, deep cleansing breaths. If you can believe it, there have been times in the morning where I'm like, ugh, I'm so impatient. Am I only at 3? Which is quite ridiculous, but it's true. And I find that those little pauses to just be and feel your aliveness will give you some perspective, whether you are in the state of momentum and flow and things are going well that day. You breathe in all that goodness, breathe it out. Wonderful. Exceptionally helpful if you are getting caught in the overwhelm or you're feeling the sadness, and it's not going to make it disappear or go away, but it just gives you that little moment of pause and aliveness to be like, I'm making it through this moment. I can make it through the next one and the next one after that. And it's just this hearty little reminder, and it's very good for you. Think of it as like the fastest moment of meditation of your life, but 3 times a day. Honestly, it just helps ground me and bring me back to presence. And then if you make it a habit to do that 3 times a day, it's basically like scheduling a check-in with yourself, which I find hugely helpful.
Wonderful.
So there you have it.
I love that one.
Sounds simple, but if you're like me,
oh no, it ain't.
Like my inner thoughts so funny to be like, oh God, we're only at this number. I'm like, and then I start judging myself to be like, that's a ridiculous thought. Oh, brains.
And you're like, you're ridiculous. And shut the fuck up. And you're like, breathe. I forgot to breathe.
Right. So funny. Do you have a quote for us today?
Oh, I forgot our quotes. It had been so.
I've got one.
No, go,
you.
Chrissy. Yeah, go,
got
girl.
you. Nothing lasts forever. I think that's the easiest lesson we all learn the hardest way. And that is your motivation.